talk to you about neglect, but I want to explain to you first what neglect is not. I've had friends say, oh, is that about when you have to go to work and leave your kids at the daycare? No, it's not about something simple. Oh, mom forgot to bring my lunch to school. I'm neglected. No, this is about a consistent pattern in which a child is needs are ignored, needs for attention and nurturing and guidance are ignored. This presentation and this whole topic of neglect is not to bash your parents, because your parents did the best they can. And I will talk to you a little bit later about brain chemistry and epigenetics and how ways of thinking are passed down from generation to generation. So my assumption is that your parents did the best they could with what they had. So I want to start by talking to you about different risky situations in which you may have experienced neglect. Now, it's granted that when overt abuse takes place, well, then you know that you've been abused, or maybe you have pressed it down inside of you somewhere. But when you go to therapy or when you go to 12-step, you find out, yes, I did experience abuse, and this contributed to how I got this way. This is about a deeper, more subtle thing that you may not have experienced some sort of overt abuse where you were very aware that you got this way because of that, is that this is something much more subtle than that, in that your needs and your nurturing as a child that every human being requires in order to develop correctly were not met. So you may, please understand that if you experience any type of abuse, you've also been neglected, because who that takes care of a child and abuses them in some way does not also neglect their needs as a child. Okay, so I want to talk to you about, first of all, 10 risky family of origin situations that may have contributed to a type of neglect. So as you listen to this, think about your own childhood and if any of these things took place. And then there's some overarching underlying subsets of things that happen to children under each of these. So we might say that it's not only the situation itself, it's some of the subsets. So let me just get started with those.
I'm going to interrupt one quick second. For those of you that are that had joined initially, if you do not see the slides in the blue bar at the top that says neglect the silent abuser, if you refresh your whole page, then you will see them. If you joined afterwards, please feel free to just click on neglect the silent abuser, because I'm looking at right now the 10 risky things, so you can follow along as well.
Okay, so let me just reiterate that this is not to blame somebody else. This is not to shame you. This is to get a greater understanding of how you got to be the way you are. And so in order to recognize neglect, because many children, they don't remember parts of their childhood, or they don't even consider neglect to be a part of their childhood. So this will kind of help wake you up into the kind of situations that do cause neglect. Okay, so here goes. And these are on the slides, but then I'll elaborate on each one of them. Number one or both parents suffer from some sort of mental illness, and here's the key, and nobody talks to the children about it. And so it happens a lot in families that maybe mother is depressed, or dad is a rager, or somebody is narcissistic, so on and so forth. But then it's kept secret because in many families that's considered a shameful thing and we don't talk about it. We especially don't talk to the children about it. And so the child is left floundering, wondering what's going on. An example of this in my practice is I remember the little boy clearly whose mother had severe bipolar disorder and stayed in bed much of the time. And of course, children with their magical thinking tend to think that it's their fault that one, that mommy or daddy are not available for them. So this child found his dad's stash of pornography and then began to masturbate to that when he was a young child, and that soothed him, which of course later turned into an addiction. So that's just kind of one example of many. So nobody talks to the kids about the suffering of one of the parents who may have some sort of mental illness. So that's number one. Number two, and this is similar to number one or both parents are addicted to alcohol and or other drugs. This risk factor is exacerbated when no one appropriately talks to the children about it. The children are just observers of what's going on and left to wonder what's going to happen. Are they going to divorce? What's going to happen to me? Did I do something wrong? Everybody's walking on eggshells. And you notice, particularly in these two and in further situations, that who's there to pay attention to the children? All the energy is going to these situations and none left over for the kids. Okay, number three, one or both parents are workaholics, which signifies the parenting and attentiveness to the children are secondary to the careers. I can't tell you how many clients I've had come in when they do intake, and I ask them to tell, particularly about the father, but sometimes about the mother too, or both of them. Tell me about your relationship with your father. I'll just give that as an example. Well, he was a suit. That's what I've heard a lot of guys say. He's just a suit. There was no emotional connection. Dad traveled for his business. He was occupied with the business. The mother was not available for one reason or another, and so therefore we get neglect. The parents don't even recognize it. They think they're making good money for the family, and the relationship is surface at best. Okay, number four, and this happens a lot, and this is certainly not necessarily the fault of the parents. Economic conditions dictate that the parents work more than one job, leaving no time or energy for parenting the children. So, and unfortunately, this happens a lot in this country, well, probably all over the world, for that matter, is that parents are they're scraping by. They're just trying to get the basics taken care of, put food on the table, on a roof over their heads, and perhaps pay a car note. So all of that focus is on that, just getting by. And that's not to say that a lot of poor families pay great attention to their kids. The kids get wonderful attention, but it's just so often the focus and the worry is so much towards making money that nobody's there for the kids, that kids have to take care of themselves. Okay, number five. One or more siblings are sick, troubled, needy, or handicapped and require attention that the other children do not get. And this happens often as well, is that who would blame the parents? Like, for example, if you had a child that was severely retarded and needed extra special care, and you have, let's just say you have 4 kids, well, which child is going to get the attention? And the parents assume that the other kids appear to have their act together. Oh, well, they're strong. They have everything they need. We have to focus over here on little Janie, who has this problem. And it's a very sad situation, but unfortunately, all children need attention and caring and nurturing, all of them, whether they're handicapped or troubled or not. Sometimes, other than a handicapping condition, you may have a child that acts out a lot, gets on drugs, is rebellious. And so, of course, aside from that being a cry for help, that kid is going to get a lot of attention, negative attention in this case. The children will get attention in any way they can get it. And quiet hero child over here in the corner, the parents assume that that child is doing well, but indeed they need attention as well. Okay, number 6. A sibling is talented in one area. This is the opposite from what I just went over in number 5. A sibling is talented in one area and the parents choose to focus on the achievements of that child to the detriment of the other children. Example of this is, say there's a couple of boys in the family. One boy is very academic. He does well and makes good grades, but he doesn't care so much for football. And the other brother, he is kind of mediocre in his grades, but he excels in playing sports. All the focus goes to attending football games and getting the accolades of being a football player, while the other child is left in his room doing his studies and wondering why nobody really loves him like the other brothers loved. I mean, these kind of things are very subtle, but indeed children are sensitive and it has an effect. Number 7, there is infidelity and or sexual addiction on the part of one parent, which causes the other parent to become so overcome with the devastation that there's no time or energy left for the children. This happens a lot when there's a betrayed partner and someone who has a sex addiction. And the children may have gotten adequate attention up to this point, but at the point at which there is discovery, it's like the rug's been pulled out from under everybody, and all the attention and all the pain goes towards focusing on recovering from this addiction, and the children kind of get left in the lurch. Okay, number 8. In a single parent household, the parent may be more focused on keeping and finding a good mate than on caring for the attention needs of the children. This doesn't happen in any case, in a lot of cases, but I have had clients whose mother was single, perhaps they divorced when the child was a year old or so, or perhaps they were never married. But the focus is on, we have to have a boyfriend, we have to go out, we have to date, we have to find somebody, and the kid kind of becomes in the way. A lot of times, sometimes the boyfriend doesn't like the kid. So, and the child feels it. The child feels that. I remember one, it comes to mind a client in particular who we were doing EMDR, and one of the traumatic events was observing mother getting ready to go out on Saturday night, watching her put on her makeup and get all fixed up. And the child knew what was coming, that she would be left alone at home. Now, this is not to say that every single mother is like this. That is absolutely not true, but it does happen. Okay, number 9. One parent dies or leaves the family, leaving the other parent grief-stricken and unable to be there to attend to the grief of and the needs of the children. So you take, for example, like dad killed in a tragic automobile accident when the children were still living at home, the oldest being about 13. Mother was completely devastated. And so she's handling her grief. She's getting all kinds of attention from the community. But the boys, I'm just thinking in this case, they were boys. The boys have nobody to talk to about this. And they're angry. And the way of expressing their pain was by beating up on their younger brother. and mother just kind of dismisses it, says, oh, don't, leave him alone. Just leave him alone. I'm just hurting too much right now. I can't deal with it. This is how brothers are, but you just can't do this. So nobody really notices what's really going on under the anger. There's nobody for these children to talk to that really understands, no one to listen. Everything is just kind of brushed off because the mother's too devastated to deal with their pain as well as her own. Okay, now there's kind of an overarching situation that takes place when you have situations like this. And what happens is when the parents are unable to be in their functional adult, and when they have not learned to parent and guide correctly, the child becomes, in some ways, more mature than the parents. So therefore, you have these children who have to become and behave in an adult manner when they're certainly not equipped to do so. They're still children, and they're not allowed to just be carefree children. They end up being what is called in therapeutic circles the parentified child. This is the child that has to listen to mother cry and complain about dad, who is either not faithful or not available for her. And so the child becomes the surrogate spouse. And I'm not talking in a sexual way here at all. I'm talking about more the emotional spouse for the child, because the parents are not getting along with each other. And so the mother would talk to the child as if that child were an adult and share her feelings, talk about current events, and it makes the child feel really special and really good. But this is not good for the child. They don't get to be a kid. A good author on this topic, if you're interested in this, is Dr. Ken Adams, when he talks about silently seduced, or let's see, When He's Married to Mom, I believe is another name of one of his other books. But it really addresses the situation where the adult parents suck the energy out of the child instead of giving them the energy to take just to be carefree children, and use the children for their own needs. So one of the people I'll talk to you about when I talk about over control, I'll give you that story later on. Okay, and finally, number 10. And this is something that happens a lot. Does your family ever tell these funny stories when they get together and they think they're funny, but they're truly not funny? Is that little Johnny was just an accident. We didn't really expect to have little Johnny, but here he is. So everybody, the adults think that's funny, but Johnny thinks, I don't have a right to exist. Could they get into an existence bind, a shame existence bind about just existing, being born. All right, now I'm just going to read number 10. When the birth of a child is unexpected or unwanted, there's a risk factor. Most people are thrilled to learn they will become new parents. Some pregnancies, however, happen unexpectedly or at an inopportune time in the life of the parent. There may be conflict, infidelity, addiction, even violence in the relationship between the mother and father of the baby. There may not be enough money to raise a child. Whoever feels that they have enough money to have a child. The list of reasons for unwanted pregnancies goes on, and any reason is a risk factor for neglect. On the other hand, I've also had clients that are in a family, a large family, let's just say 6 kids. So the number of siblings in a family may be too many for the parents to be able to pay individual attention to each child. Each little personality is different. And some children do fine in this situation, but others may feel lost in the shuffle. So, it's easy for people to think that, all the kids are alike, but they're not. Every child has a different personality. They're not little clones of each other. And so while some children are very resilient and, being in a big family is a good thing, others maybe are not. And they just kind of get lost in all of that. Okay. So I think that's all I'm going to say about risk factors for neglect. And this is the kind of neglect that we all identify as like kids not getting enough attention throughout their life, not getting the proper guidance that they need. And the younger that this happens, and there's been a whole lot of studies starting with John Bowlby about failure to thrive children, the younger that all of this happens, the worse it is. Because when neglect happens when a child is pre-verbal, they don't have words for it. Children have like a feeling in their body. There may be something in their body that's wrong, or something may trigger them. I'll talk to you a little bit about brain chemistry later, about triggers. But something may trigger just a feeling of great sadness or anger or fear, mainly fear. And they don't know where that's coming from. Well, that's a good indication that neglect or abuse happened before they were able to put into words what was happening to them. Okay, now the other side of neglect is something we don't think about too much, but I have found in my practice of 25 years that over-control can be a form of neglect as well. So I haven't put a lot of information on that slide. It just says over-control, the other side of neglect. Here's how over-control works. When children are born, they're a unique little person. They have their own little genes, their own personality, their own, of course, physical characteristics, and so on. But the parents may have other ideas about what that child is going to be. So parents who are, a couple of issues here I want to discuss about the over-control thing. It's like parents who want, let's just say that want their child to be a certain type. Let's just say the child that was born and dad was looking forward to having a burly football player, but indeed the child turns out to be a sensitive child that couldn't care less about hunting and fishing and playing rough and tumble football, and instead feels bound to obey what dad wants and plays football anyway. It's a neglect of the child's soul, because it's not, I think the point to this is, it's over control is not about the needs of the child. It's about meeting the needs of the parents. It's about giving them something to talk to their friends about, giving them something that they expected to have but didn't get, instead of embracing and loving a child for exactly who they are and allowing them to make choices and decisions on their own. Over-controlling parents tell the children who they're going to be, how they're going to think, and so they control everything about a child. You think about a child that mother's still telling the little girl how to dress when she's 15 years old, laying out her clothes for her. And you will wear this, you won't wear that. Now, granted, I don't want you to think that it's not okay to guide children. That's certainly what must be done. You have to guide them and give them appropriate choices and explain to them why it's not appropriate to wear these certain things and not appropriate to do this or that or the other. But you still allow the child's personality to develop so that they know what they like. They can make a decision for themselves, what they like and what they don't like within reason. And another aspect of this is the falsely empowered child. And that's the child where they can do no wrong, or according to the parents. And this is a kid that gets in trouble at school. It's always the teacher's fault. It's the coach's fault. It's someone else's fault. It's never their fault. Children like this have difficulty with the higher power concept because they are the higher power after all. They can't make a mistake. This is a neglect of the child's soul as well, because indeed, children are not perfect. No one's perfect. We're supposed to be imperfect beings. And it's okay, because that's just fact. We are imperfect beings, and we embrace ourselves as imperfect beings. But when we make a mistake, we can catch ourselves, make amends, and then keep on going with life. But children who are over-controlled and falsely empowered have difficulty. And a lot of times this kind of feeds into the narcissistic concept that, nobody else really matters but me. So this is also a kind of neglect in the over-control. I'll give you a story. And I think this is particularly true in the LGBTQ community, is that when parents expect a child to be born cisgender, as they say now, but straight, as they used to say, where the parents are expecting a child to meet all the characteristics of the current culture and, grow up, fall in love with a woman, the opposite sex, get married, 2 kids, house in the suburbs, so on. That doesn't hold water, and I think it's particularly sad when a child is born and expected to be something that they're not. I found this a lot to be true in the gay community, where children, they couldn't talk about, they didn't understand why they felt differently, but they knew early on that they were not meeting the characteristics that their parents expected of them. And I could talk about this for an hour as well, but I won't. But it's another example of the over-control and the failure to allow children to be who they are. It's a neglect of their soul. So that's all I'm going to say on the types of situations that you may recognize that cause you to have suffered neglect, even if there has not been abuse to go along with it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the brain. I did have a section in the book on the brain, and it's very simple. The book was truly not written for clinicians, although clinicians use the book. But the book was written for people like you, people in recovery, people that need recovery, people who are suffering. Because, in fact, we all suffer in one degree or another. I kind of like to tell the story. It's kind of a universal story about what you're aware of in life is kind of like an iceberg. It's the part you see above the water. And yet when you think about the huge amount of material that's under the water that you don't see, that's the part that you have to delve into. That's the part you don't realize. And that's, according to brain chemistry, that's the limbic system. In the limbic system is stored all of your memories from the time your mother was pregnant with you. Everything is stored in the cells. And in the limbic system, part of the limbic system contains the amygdala. The amygdala stores the emotions, especially in the emotion of fear. And when the amygdala is triggered, you may get upset about something that's happening in the present time, but it's really not about that. You may wonder, why am I so upset about this? Why am I so angry about this? Why do I feel so terrified? It's about originally, there was something that happened that you're not aware of. You may have forgotten it. That's why we have so many children with forgotten childhoods, because their psyche mercifully helped them to forget. But they still get triggered and can't figure things out. So this is not to blame yourself. Oh, I'm just a bad person. Why do I get triggered about this? Why am I using this substance? Why am I doing this practice? Why am I doing something that's so contrary to my value system? What's happening to me? this limbic system stores these things that trigger you, and it stores the pain. And so when you're in pain, neglect produces pain, by the way. And so when you're in pain, you're going to find a way, your psyche finds a way for you to survive that pain so that you can grow up and function, or at least appear to function. So part of your recovery is going to be going inside yourself, because most of us, I would say 90% of us, before we ever recognized who we are and got recovery, is that all the focus was outside of ourselves somewhere, and not realizing that the answer to it all is right in here, right inside of us. The other factor I want to talk to you about is epigenetics. We know about the genetic code. It's pretty straightforward these days, but now there has been a lot of research, particularly at UCLA, on the concept of epigenetics. Epigenetics simply means above the genes. And just to explain it kind of in a simplistic way, not only does it cover tendencies toward disease that pass down from generation to generation, epigenetics also covers behavioral worldview concepts that pass down from generation to generation. So, for example, let's just say your great-grandparents viewed the world a certain way. They were afraid of certain kind of people. Whatever they felt about the world, that gets passed down kind of like programming from generation to generation to generation. And so I think a good kind of a comical illustration of this is that, did your mother ever or dad ever say something or do something that you abhorred and you said you will never say that, never do that? And then when you grow up, you find yourself saying it. And this is how the epigenetics work. And kind of the answer to that is catch yourself when you do it. Be mindful and say, there it is again, and what am I going to do about it? Do I want to change it? All right, so now we've covered how you discover it. And you really have to honor your body in a way, and your psyche has invented a way for you to survive what happened to you. And my belief is that all the things that are stored that need to come out will come out at some point. You don't have to try to remember the trauma. That's not a good idea. It can be totally overwhelming unless you're in a situation that's very, very guarded. I'm just going to forget the situation guarded. Just think about, don't try to remember, but your body will help you to remember when you're strong enough to do so. You have to get to a point where you can begin to remember and to address the issues. And that's okay. So you just learn to embrace yourself. Okay, now, next. So maybe you've discovered that you have experienced some sort of neglect. And what effect does that have on your adult life? Well, generally, when you first see it coming to the forefront is where it really shows itself is in relationships. And then you go to therapy to try to figure out why you and your partner can't get along with each other. Why are they so demanding? Why am I so controlling? Why am I so needy? But then, then you discover that when you look at your childhoods, then you discover that, oh, this is why. This is why. Okay, so here are some characteristics, and they kind of run the gamut of children who have been neglected. Number one, you don't trust anybody. In reality, why should you? You never did get what it was promised to you. So you don't trust anybody at all. Number 2, you look outside yourself for validation. There's no looking within, it's all without, because you had to control your outside circumstances. Number 3, here's the opposite from number 1. You trust everybody indiscriminately. And this is particularly true of over-control. When there's somebody dictating to you how to feel, how to think, how to be, you don't learn to trust yourself. So, though you give in, you give in and you find relationships with people that can tell you anything and you'll believe anything because you're like sawdust. You don't even know. I'm one of those people, by the way. So I know very well how I allowed others to manipulate me because I always had somebody telling me how to think. And I had to learn to think for myself and find out what I wanted. So this is the job, particularly of kids who've been over-controlled. Number 4, you feel overwhelmed much of the time. You just feel you can't handle it. This is very important that you learn not to be and that you learn to trust yourself because life is going to throw you a curveball. That's the way life is. So you have to learn to get through it. Number 5, you may have a pattern, probably do have a pattern of failed relationships. And you may ask yourself, why do I keep getting into these with these same kind of people over and over? It's a result of neglect. You have trouble with feelings. For probably a majority of people in recovery or not in recovery yet, the name of emotion is a foreign language. And so very gently, you have to learn to go inside yourself and put a name to what it is you're feeling. And by the way, what you're feeling is not, oh, I feel like going to the bar today. No, that it's not, I feel like. This is, I feel scared. I feel inadequate. I feel sad. Those are emotions. Okay? You have to learn that. Number 7, you feel empty without someone else in your life. Number 8, you have trouble loving yourself. That critical voice plays in your head all the time. You have to learn to make friends with the critical voice and to say, no, I don't think so. I'm fine just the way I am. Number 9, you take things personally and fear you will be abandoned. And number 10, you are addicted to either a substance or behavior. And I want to quote Patrick Carnes here. I'll never forget it. He said, you can be addicted to just about anything. You can be as addicted to sweeping the floor. So when I say that you have an addiction, I'm saying that you had to establish something by which you tamped down those feelings, the pain and the woundedness and the emptiness so that you could survive. It may have worked okay when you were a child, but it does not work anymore. All right, so these are some of the effects that you get. So if you notice that you're having trouble with some of these things, maybe you would like to look back at your childhood and examine if you experienced neglect. Okay, so now what are you supposed to do about it? There's a number of things that you can do. And there is no magic to the whole thing. I'm sorry to tell you, but you have to do the work. Now it's been dumped in your lap. Not fair. Of course, it's not fair. But now all of this now has been dumped in your lap, and you have the knowledge that you need. You have the understanding of yourself. And so you have to start out on your own hero's journey so that you can find yourself and heal. Okay. And I put number 1 first because that's the number 1 problem. Look at step 1. You must realize you cannot do this alone. Accept this fact. Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and taking one step at a time into the darkness is not going to work. You need other people. We're wired to be in connection with others. I think 2020 has shown us that. that we need the help of others. So 2, connect with the group. Now, I'm big on 12-step, and a lot of people are not. But so I'm just going to say, if you're not so big on 12-step and you want to do it another way, you can go to a therapy group, join some other kind of group. But I think it's a good idea to be in a group with people who suffer in the same way that you do, so you can realize you're not alone. So I'm just going to name this from a 12-step perspective. Preferably go to a 12-step group. It's free. Go to a group that applies to your particular way of avoiding your feelings or pain. So if you know you're addicted to sex, that's the group for you. If you know you're addicted to alcohol, that's the group for you. If you can't figure out what you're addicted to, ACA has wonderful meetings. And that's not just adult children of alcoholics, it's adult children of dysfunctional families as well. So don't think, my parents were not alcoholics. No, they were dysfunctional. So try that. Okay, number 3. Accept that doing the steps is not a spectator sport. How many people have I heard say, well, that didn't work for me? Did you ever say a thing? No. Did you ever work the steps? No. Did you ever get a sponsor? No. Well, how's it going to work if you don't work it? You have to work it. You may hesitate to talk at first, of course. If you don't know anything about 12-step, if you're a newbie, you can just sit there for a while. Just sit there and listen to everybody else. But one day you may have to open your mouth and say, hi, my name is Enid. I'm a sex addict, or whatever fits. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. But once you do it, you have to get involved and you have to work your program. And if you work it, it will work. It will work. They're experiential. Nobody can tell you what it's like. As you work it, you experience it. Okay, number 4. I'm real big on this one. Have a daily practice that involves gently going inside yourself and getting to know who you are. Accept and embrace your imperfections. That includes your addiction. When you get to know your addict, you can't kick it out. It's part of you. And that part of you has to be examined and embraced and understood. It thought it was there to protect you, but indeed it's now become your destroyer, and you have to give it another job to do. So I think the point I'm making here in number 4 is that the answer to this is within you. It's not outside of you. It's within you. It's finding you. It's finding your integrity. Because anybody that is not in their integrity is not a happy person. Okay. So that doesn't have to be, well, you need to sit and read 3 scriptures every day and say a made-up prayer. This can be like you read like an inspirational reading from 12-step, or you read just something that's positive for you, and you just may sit in silence for 15 or 20 minutes. But get to know who you are and make that a daily practice. Number 5, and we all have seen the pie charts where we work towards having balanced self-care. Eat healthy, get some exercise, declutter. All of those things do help. But don't be too hard on yourself about it. We're a work in progress. Number 6, journal. A lot of people have problems with journaling. They think it's like I have to write an essay every day. No, it's like when you're in your daily practice and maybe in the silence a thought comes to you, kind of an aha moment, write it down. Or if you feel overwhelmed with your feelings, this saved me when I was first in recovery. My journal saved me. It was my friend. I cussed. I screamed. I said every awful thing you could possibly say. It was put down into that book. And I got it out and got rid of it. And then I began to get some insights into who I was. That went down into the book. But it's not a homework assignment. Nobody's going to check it. Nobody's going to see it but you. But it really helps you to get an understanding to journal. Number 7, stop blaming other people and stop shaming yourself. I don't think I need to say any more about that. And number 8, I'm real big on doing body work, not just talk therapy. I think cognitive behavioral and talk therapy is a wonderful thing, but to expect that to heal you is no. Do body work such as EMDR, yoga, somatic experiencing, mindfulness meditation. There's all kinds of different things where your body is involved in just going within and accessing and noticing what's there. Okay, number 9. Allow your functional adult self, that's the one that's the adult, not the kid, to drive your bus, and ask your inner children to relax and sit behind you. All they get to do is be kids. They don't have to take care of you. You take care of them. They live in your heart, and you take care of your inner children. And indeed, that doesn't make you an MPD, multiple personality. It makes you human. We all have inner children. Number 10, reading my book on neglect will help, but you have to do the work. I don't know how many clients I've had that have told me the number of books that they have read and workbooks they have done and so on and so forth, but they're still the same. I said, how many of those things have you done that are recommended within the books? Nothing. So you can read. It's helpful to read and have knowledge, but you have to do the work. Number 11, work on your relationship. If you want to be in relationship, if you want to stay in relationship, then you both have to work on it. Hopefully it can be repaired. However, if it is abusive or not salvageable, you may have to make a healthy decision to get out of it. This feeling that you have to be trapped in an abusive relationship simply because maybe the church doesn't like it, that just doesn't hold water. And I'm not trying to bash the church here, but there's been a lot of people trapped and feeling like, well, I have to stay with this because it would be wrong for me to divorce. It would also be wrong to deny who you are and to keep getting abused. It's helpful if your partner gets help as well. I've seen amazing transformations, amazing people I never thought could do it. But I've seen amazing transformations with couples who do their own work. It's really, humans amaze me. And number 12, develop a spiritual life of some sort. A lot of people have trouble with step 3, but boy, if you really regard it as not as a religion, but as a spiritual life, you'll really discover something wonderful and powerful that's always there for you. And finally, accept there is no destination. There's only the journey. You're not going to come to a point where you have arrived. There's always something to work on. And finally, embrace that you have what it takes to do this and enjoy your journey. So that's all I have to say. And we have, I'll see, about 10 minutes or so.
So for those of you joining, if you have questions for Enid, if you would message them to me and I will read them, but I took a whole bunch of notes while you were talking. So you mentioned Dr. Ken Adams, silently seduced, and when you're married to mom, or when he's married to mom, and he did so if that's of interest, the over enmeshment, over parentalizing, Dr. Adams did a video on he did a live session on Super Saturday Recovery Summit, so you can find that in the videos too. The neglect of the child's soul, man, like it hit me like that phrase, when you were talking about that, and I thought, wow, so many kids, their souls have been neglected, and they all look fine on the outside. It's all fine, but it, it's the soul. So we've got a question, and okay. Can you ask how to determine what to tell your kids in regards to addiction in the family? because you talked about when it's not talked about. So how do you talk about it in a caring way that doesn't overdo for the children? So does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's situational, but indeed you do have to talk about it, and you talk about it as a disease. You don't talk about it like dad's just a no good drunk kind of thing. You say that you tell the truth, but you tell the truth in a gentle way, and you emphasize that it's not the fault of the child. It's not the fault of anybody for that matter. It's just that dad has an addiction. I'm using dad as an example. I mean, it could be mom or sister, brother. It could be anything. But they're not happy, and hopefully along with that you would say, and they are getting help for that. So I think I would need to know more of the circumstances of the situation, but I think it's entirely appropriate to talk to children about whatever is going on in the household in an appropriate, age appropriate way. For example, and I'm just going to use sex addiction as an example, you wouldn't tell a 7-year-old child that dad is out sleeping with prostitutes. No, you would say dad has an illness where he is addicted, and he's not been faithful to mommy, but we're working it. I think the important part is we're getting help, and it's not about you. We will always be here for you, and we love you. See, that, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and we talk all the time on sex and relationship healing.com too, of like, okay to tell the kids, we're struggling, we've got some issues, dad, as you mentioned, needs some help and things like this. This isn't about you, but we don't even go to the he's been unfaithful, because then that puts him in the you did this to mommy,
well, that's true too. That's true too.
So we're super careful about what to say, but yet ignoring the elephant in the room that there's issues, just like they sense it, the whole inability to, put your fingers on what's going on, but knowing that this is not right, it must be me as a child. So,
yeah,
okay.
Kids are little energy sponges.
Yes. Yeah. Can we underline all of this as children were not filled up as they were supposed to be? Most aren't.
Absolutely. But like I said in the very beginning, it really is a pattern of behavior, a pattern of neglect, not just every once in a while, because I mean, I think everybody could name a time that they felt neglected, but did it happen over and over? Is there a pattern?
So the next one is, I was a surrogate spouse for my father who passed. Why he died, when he died, I drank heavily for 6 years and now in recovery 8 months. Yay. How can I calm my extreme nervousness? My father was my go-to guy and rock. I still feel devastated, but life has to move on.
This is a grief process that, I mean, I'm not going to say you'll ever get over this. It will. I think what's important is that you allow yourself to grieve his passing, allow yourself to grieve the relationship that you had with him, and get a lot of support from others, and know that it comes in waves. And when it comes, you're very gentle and kind to yourself so that you become your rock.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're here, but and get a little posse of people that can support you, in a different way. It won't be the same. I mentioned at the beginning of this, Sophia Caudle does on the In the Rooms platform some grief groups, and perhaps that would be some place to start, to just start being supported to process, that level of grief. So. Caring mother and father sadness and emotions, how to separate from this deep carried sadness for them, their lives and feelings. They are gone for years.
Is that person saying that their parents did not have a happy life and they feel a lot of sadness for that?
That's what I'm reading. So they died, it sounds like, quite a while ago, but this person is still carrying grief about the deep sadness for their lives and their feelings. So I would say they did not have a happy and joyous life, and this person is still, perhaps the grief group, that I just mentioned with Sophia Cottle would be a good fit for you as well. But what are your thoughts?
That sounds like a good idea as well. But and I can relate to this because my mother had type 1 diabetes and she was sick a lot. Well, and so I grieve a lot for the whole sadness of her passing and illness. But you do have to separate yourself and be thankful that her offspring, or the parents' offspring, is now living a recovery life and has survived that. And while you may have compassion for your parents and grief for them, you have to somehow let that go in the past. And I think a grief group would be an excellent idea for that, just to be able to talk to others about it.
So a follow-up from the person that expressed nervousness, she said, Sophia, my mother was also institutionalized for neglect, so I have trouble even knowing who I am from others. That's powerful, like you were talking about with the adult children. That's a powerful comment.
I have trouble knowing who I am from others. I hope the person's in therapy, and I hope that they're allowing the therapist to, help them to know themselves, because that's how you find who you are, is spending time with yourself, with your precious self, and determining, because the therapist will ask questions: what do you want? What do you like? What feels good to you? So it's a process of discovering that the heart of yourself. Yeah. That's it's very sad. Yeah.
I was thinking about your journaling idea too, and journaling your thoughts and feelings, might be useful too. And you mentioned also mindfulness and, doing something. I'm big on positive, positive messages first thing in the morning. Like that is my go-to thing, particularly during COVID. I've had to do that, put something positive in so that I have a little armor on to face the world, before something else happens. So the more, you also mentioned too, like there are certain things that I say and I go, oh, that's my dad, and he's, I love him very much and all that, but like his negative message, like, I'll say the same thing that he used to say about himself. And I just go, oh, that's my dad, calling himself an idiot or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not an idiot. I didn't make a great choice in that moment, but I don't have to do that. So catching myself in that. So I'm also wondering if you just being able to recognize that might be your mom's voice, not your voice, and who are you to you, not just what the world wants you to be. Like you mentioned the iceberg, we only show a little bit. Who are we? And embracing that, warts and all, is what I think recovery is all about.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned this is dumped in our lap and it's not fair, but I thought, but it's an opportunity, because otherwise we're constantly a victim of all of this. And to be able to look at this and go, I own this, and now I have some information. And you're right, reading a book is helpful, but I've shared with so many people too, if just reading a book was all we needed, we'd read one book and then we'd be all recovered and everything would be great. That's not how it works. We have to do the work. But I look at this as information so that I have the ability to address the things I need to do so I can live in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to spend your life being a martyr. I mean, how many people do you know, there's the same old thing over and over and over and over, and you think, well, what are you going to do about it? You're going to have to do something about it. And that's the thing. You're right. It's not fair. You didn't get what you needed as a child, but yeah, and that's not fair, but this is life. And so you do get the opportunity to choose now. You can choose.
Yes. And so we are out of time, but what you just talked about is change. And Dr. Carlo Di Clemente will be joining us to talk about change. And I think we as addicts are so, we want to dig in our heels and do it our way and do, like I want to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting things to get different. And so he's going to talk to us about opportunities for change. And so one more time, I would really invite you to take a look at this book. It is a powerful message. It may be some healing. There's lots of other resources. So join us in an hour. Dr. Di Clemente will be with us. So we've got 2 more sessions today, but thank you so much, Enid, for your time today. Great presentation. I love this topic. So
thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. See you in an hour.
Bye-bye.